Good evening. Let me begin with a question. Have you ever made a decision you regretted? Not because you lacked knowledge, but because you lost control of your emotions in the moment? That argument with someone you love, that opportunity you missed because you panicked, that sleepless night spent replaying what you could have said, what you should have done. You're not alone. We all carry these moments. But what if I told you calm isn't a trait, it's a skill? And like any skill, it can be trained. We live in a world that doesn't wait. Everything is urgent. The moment we wake up, we're greeted by notifications, headlines, unanswered emails, and a calendar that somehow filled itself overnight. We don't ease into our day, we collide with it. And when that's the pace, when every second feels like a demand, our nervous system doesn't just keep up, it goes into overdrive. The body tenses, the breath shortens, and the mind prepares for battle, not because we're in danger, but because we've been trained to react as if we are. But calm doesn't mean life has calmed down. It doesn't mean the meetings disappeared or the problems vanished or the world suddenly became gentler. Calm doesn't come from what's around us. It comes from what's within us. It's not the absence of stress. It's the mastery of our response to it. Imagine a firefighter entering a building engulfed in flames. Smoke is thick, the temperature rising, every second matters. Do you think they're not afraid? Of course they are. Their pulse is racing, their instincts are on high alert. But watch them move. Deliberate, focused, composed. That kind of calm is not a gift. It's not who they are, it's what they've trained to become. They've rehearsed in pressure. They've built stillness into chaos. We can all do that, not because we're training to run into fires, but because we already do, metaphorical ones, every day. The colleague who talks over us in meetings, the unexpected bill, the friend who suddenly pulls away, the news that knocks the wind out of us. These are the fires we face, and most of us rush in without protection. We go in untrained. But what if we didn't? There's a moment between the thing that happens and the way we respond that's almost invisible, a split second. And yet that moment is where our power lives. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is the choice to rise above reaction. This isn't just an idea, it's backed by science. Dr. Judson Brewer, a neuroscientist who studies anxiety and decision-making, explains that the brain's default is to escape uncertainty as fast as possible. That's how we're wired. Something feels threatening, emotionally or physically, and the brain scrambles to make it stop. That's where the knee-jerk reactions come from. That sharp reply, that decision we regret, that anxious spiral at 2 a.m. It's not weakness, it's our biology trying to protect us. But here's the good news. We're not stuck with that default setting. A simple pause, a conscious breath, 3 seconds of silence, can interrupt the loop. When we pause, the brain shifts. It moves from the primitive, survival-driven part of the brain into the part that sees the bigger picture. It's not a trick. That's training. That's what rewires us. You felt it before. Think back to a time when you wanted to lash out, but you didn't. You stopped, you breathed, you chose patience. Maybe it was with your child, maybe it was with yourself. That moment wasn't weakness, it was strength. That was calm being practiced, not perfection being achieved. The real power is not in pretending stress doesn't exist. It's in facing it and choosing how you show up over and over until that choice becomes your default. Until one day you're the one who brings steadiness into the room, the one others look to when things feel like they're falling apart. And no, you don't need to be a firefighter. You just need to practice the pause, because every time you do, you train your mind to lead, not follow. And that's where true calm begins. Let me take you back to a moment you probably experienced in some way. A crowded airport terminal, a delayed flight, maybe a canceled one. No explanation, no apology, just that cold announcement over the speaker. You look around and instantly the air shifts. People clench their jaws, voices rise. One person's yelling, another's crying, someone's pacing like a caged animal. The entire mood of the room flips in seconds. And in the middle of it all, there's that one person who just stands quietly, not smiling, not pretending it's okay, just grounded, present, aware, not passive, aware. A friend of mine was that person. His flight was canceled without warning. Everyone else reacted exactly how you'd expect, complaining, demanding, losing it. But he stood there, calm. Someone asked him, "Why aren't you angry?" And without missing a beat, he said, "What would that change?" That's it. That's the shift. That's the place we rarely go because it requires something uncomfortable, awareness instead of reaction. See, we've been conditioned to react. From the moment we were little, we watched people around us explode, snap, withdraw, break down, and we learned that emotions meant action. That if we were hurt, we had to defend. If we were angry, we had to retaliate. If we were scared, we had to run. But that's not truth, that's habit. And habits aren't destiny. Awareness doesn't ask you to ignore your emotions. It asks you to listen to them without handing them the keys. It invites you to pause and observe before you respond. And that pause, that gap is everything. That's where leadership begins. That's where emotional maturity is built, not in suppressing what you feel, but in understanding it before acting on it. Anger is real. So is fear. So is sadness. They're all valid, but we don't have to become them. Feeling angry doesn't mean you are anger. It means something in you has been touched, maybe a boundary, maybe a wound. And your job in that moment isn't to erupt, it's to become aware. Try this. Next time something triggers you, pause, literally stop yourself for a breath. And in that space, name what you're feeling. Say it out loud if you can. I feel frustrated. I feel dismissed. I feel unseen. You'd be amazed at what happens when you name an emotion instead of letting it name you. What you're doing in that moment is simple but powerful. You're putting space between yourself and your reaction. You're giving yourself the room to respond rather than be ruled by the emotion of the moment. And here's the incredible thing. When we name it, the emotion often loses its grip. It stops being the storm and becomes something we can navigate. This isn't a trick, it's a practice. And like all practices, it takes time. You'll still react sometimes. You'll still say something you wish you hadn't. But with repetition, awareness gets stronger. The pause gets longer. The space between what happens and how you respond becomes a little more spacious each time. And that space, that's where your best self lives. That's where clarity shows up. That's where you stop being someone who adds to the chaos and start being someone who calms it. Awareness isn't weakness. It's the deepest kind of strength because it means you're no longer at the mercy of whatever shows up in front of you. You're choosing how to show up in return. And in a world that is constantly pressing for reaction, that choice to respond with awareness is one of the most radical things you can do. Let me ask you something simple. Do you wait until you have a cavity before brushing your teeth? Of course not. That would sound ridiculous. You brush every day, not because something is wrong, but because you know it's the little consistent things that keep problems from becoming emergencies. Now here's the real question. Why don't we treat our minds the same way? We wait until we're overwhelmed, until we snap at someone we care about, until our chest tightens and our sleep disappears. Then we start thinking about calm. Then we go looking for peace like it's a medicine we can swallow in crisis. But calm doesn't work like that. Calm is not a response, it's a practice. It's a daily discipline. It's not something you reach for in the middle of the storm. It's something you build when the sky is clear. You don't train for the marathon the day before the race. You train every morning, every mile, every drop of sweat that no one sees. And when race day comes, you're ready, not because it's easy, but because you've prepared. Your mind is no different. If you want to show up calm when life throws something at you, and it will, you need to be practicing calm before it ever does. Think of calm like emotional hygiene, daily habits. Small, simple, but incredibly powerful. Things like meditation, not for hours, even 5 minutes. Not to become a monk, but to become aware. Journaling, writing down your thoughts. Not to have perfect answers, but to get the noise out of your head and onto the page. A walk, just you and the world. No phone, no podcast, no distraction, just breathing. These aren't luxuries, these are foundation. These are the tools that build emotional resilience, not in theory, but in practice. Look at the world's top athletes, people like Serena Williams, Novak Djokovic, Simone Biles. We admire their physical excellence, but what we don't talk about enough is how mentally conditioned they are. These are people who train their minds as intensely as they train their bodies. Djokovic once said, "You can't control what happens around you, but you can control what happens within you." And that's not just a quote, it's a strategy. It's how he wins under pressure. It's how he stays composed when the world is watching and everything is on the line. He didn't learn that composure in the middle of the final. He built it in the quiet moments, in the early mornings, in the routines no one posted about. And that's where your calm is built too, in the discipline of consistency, in choosing the small grounding habits that no one will give you a trophy for, but that give you a strength you can rely on when it matters most. Because life doesn't schedule its storms. The email that changes everything comes at 3 p.m. on a random Tuesday. The phone call you didn't expect comes in the middle of dinner. The decision you're not ready to make lands in your lap anyway. And when that happens, you won't rise to the occasion. You'll fall back on your training. And if you haven't trained for calm, chaos will lead. So don't wait. Don't wait for the crisis to teach you how to be still. Practice now, while it's quiet, while you have space. Because calm is not a one-time achievement. It's a rhythm, a ritual, a way of living that prepares you not for if life gets hard, but for when it does. And when that moment comes, you'll meet it not with panic, but with peace, because you've already built it into who you are. Let's get practical. We talk a lot about calm like it's this philosophical idea, something nice to have when the time allows, but calm isn't a luxury. It's a strategy. It's a tool that works in real life, in real moments, with real people. It creates better outcomes, not just for you, but for everyone around you. In every environment where decisions are made, where relationships are built, where emotions run high, calm is the difference between reaction and resolution, between escalation and understanding. In business, for example, the best leaders aren't the loudest in the room. They're not the ones slamming fists or rushing to speak. The best leaders are the ones who can sit in discomfort, hear something difficult, and stay grounded. They don't make decisions from fear. They don't lead from panic. They lead from clarity. And clarity only shows up when calm is present. When everyone else is rushing to react, the calm leader is the one who steps back, looks at the whole picture, and chooses to respond from a place of wisdom instead of emotion. Think about your own workplace. Who do you turn to when things go sideways? Who do people rally around in a crisis? It's almost always the person who stays centered, not because they have all the answers, but because they're not adding to the chaos. They make people feel safe. And safety is what allows people to do their best work. Calm doesn't just lead to better choices. It creates the conditions where better thinking is even possible. In relationships, the same principle applies. Calm says, even when I'm upset, I'm still here, I'm still listening, and that presence, that steady energy, it creates trust, it builds emotional safety, because what we all want, what we need, is to feel like we can show up fully, even when we're struggling, and still be met with understanding instead of judgment. You don't solve conflict by raising your voice. You solve it by lowering your guard. And calm helps you do that. It gives you space to breathe, to actually hear what the other person is saying instead of just preparing your rebuttal. It softens the edges of hard conversations. It turns defensiveness into dialogue. In parenting, calm teaches more than any lecture ever could. Kids don't learn emotional regulation from words. They learn it from watching you. When they see you pause instead of explode, when they see you take a breath before reacting, when they see you manage your own frustration with patience and grace, they absorb that. It becomes their model. You're not just keeping the peace in the moment, you're teaching them how to carry peace into their own lives. And here's something else. Calm is contagious. It spreads. When one person in a room remains calm, it shifts the entire energy. You've seen this before, a group of people spiraling in tension, and then someone walks in, not with solutions, but with steady presence. And suddenly the room changes. People breathe deeper, voices lower, focus returns. That's not coincidence. That's emotional leadership. There's a study out of the University of Southern California that found in tense negotiations, when just one person stays composed, the other party becomes more cooperative. That doesn't just change outcomes, it changes relationships. It builds bridges where walls were starting to rise. That's not just psychology. That's influence. That's power used wisely. Because calm isn't weak. It's not passive. It's the quiet strength that holds everything together when the pressure hits. It's the force that turns moments of potential chaos into turning points for connection. And in a world that moves fast and feels increasingly reactive, calm is the edge that sets you apart, not by controlling the world, but by mastering how you show up in it. There's this idea out there that being calm means being unshakable all the time. Like somehow if you've trained your mind enough, you'll never raise your voice, never lose your cool, never feel that wave of panic rising in your chest. But that's not what calm really is. Calm isn't perfection, it's progress. It's not about never falling, it's about learning to catch yourself faster. It's about getting better at coming back to center. Again and again, no matter how far off track you go. You're going to have moments when you snap, when you say something you regret, when your patience runs out. We all do. That doesn't mean you've failed. That doesn't mean you're not strong or self-aware. It means you're human. The question is never, did I stay calm all day? The question is, when I didn't, how quickly did I notice and what did I choose to do next? That's what real training looks like, not the absence of emotion, but the awareness of it, the ability to step outside the spiral and say, this isn't who I want to be right now. And instead of beating yourself up, you breathe, you reset, you re-engage, this time with intention. Think about someone who really inspires you. Not because they're perfect, but because they carry themselves with a kind of steady strength. Chances are it's not because they never get emotional. It's because they know how to return to calm, because they own their mistakes, because they apologize with humility, because they choose to show up with compassion, even when it would be easier to shut down or lash out. That's not weakness, that's deep inner work. And it's what the world needs more of. We don't need more people yelling louder. We don't need more people who can win arguments or dominate conversations. We need people who can stay grounded when everything around them is shaking. People who don't just react to pressure, but who transform it into presence. That's what anchors a team, a family, a relationship, a community. It's not control, it's emotional maturity. And the beautiful thing is this kind of calm is built in the small moments, not the dramatic ones. It's built when you pause before responding to that rude email. When you stop yourself mid-sentence because you realize you're about to speak from frustration, not clarity. when you take a walk instead of picking a fight, when you say, I didn't handle that well, and genuinely mean it. These are the moments where growth happens quietly, consistently, and they matter more than you think. Calm doesn't mean you stop feeling things deeply. In fact, it often means you feel more because you're not shutting it out. You're not drowning in it either. You're learning to sit with it, to understand it, and to choose how to act from it rather than be ruled by it. That's not about being stoic. It's about being anchored, rooted, present. And the more you practice this, the stronger that anchor becomes, not because life gets easier, but because you get steadier. You learn to trust yourself in the chaos. You learn that losing your temper doesn't mean losing your progress. And most importantly, you learn how to lead not just others, but yourself. Because the real mark of strength isn't how well you hold it together when it's easy. It's how you come back to center when it's not. That's calm. That's growth. And that's the kind of presence that makes a difference in the world. Life doesn't give us warnings. It doesn't tap us on the shoulder and say, get ready, everything's about to change. It just happens. The call comes in the middle of dinner. The job you counted on disappears. A message you weren't expecting brings news that shifts everything. Plans fall through. People walk away. The ground underneath your feet shakes. And no one ever teaches us how to stay steady when that happens. But what if steadiness isn't something you're born with? What if it's something you learn, something you practice? What if calm isn't the result of everything going right, but the decision to stand tall even when nothing is? We live in a time where reactivity is the norm. Scroll through any comment section. Watch how fast people rush to judgment, how quick we are to speak, and how slow we are to understand. But what if, in a world moving at the speed of outrage, you chose stillness? Not silence, but presence. Not apathy, but awareness. Not retreat, but responsibility. Imagine this. The next time life doesn't go as planned, the promotion doesn't come, the relationship shifts, the unexpected arrives. Pause. Not because you have all the answers, but because you're learning to ask better questions. Questions like, can I breathe here? Can I be centered, even if nothing around me is? Can I be a safe space, not just for others, but for myself? Because calm isn't just something you practice for you. It's something others feel when they're near you. When someone is spiraling and you don't join them, you offer them a path back to peace. When someone lashes out and you don't retaliate, you show them what strength actually looks like. When someone is drowning in uncertainty and you remain steady, you remind them it's possible to weather the storm. We often think of influence as something loud, something bold, but sometimes the most powerful form of leadership is quiet. It's the calm voice in a tense room. It's the person who doesn't panic when the plan changes. It's the presence that steadies everyone else simply by existing. You know that moment when someone looks at you with tearful eyes and says, I don't know what to do, and you don't try to fix it? You just stay with them? That's calm. That's leadership. That's love in its strongest form. And we all have the ability to be that person, not because we have all the answers, but because we've done the work to sit with our own discomfort long enough to hold space for someone else's. So when the next storm hits, and it will, remember that calm is a choice, a hard one, a brave one. It will feel unfamiliar at first. You'll want to react, to run, to raise your voice. But in that pause, in that secret breath, ask yourself, who do I want to be right now? And maybe, just maybe, you'll become the kind of person you once wished would walk into the room when everything was falling apart. The kind of person whose strength doesn't come from shouting louder, but from standing taller. The kind of person who doesn't get lost in the noise, but becomes the reason someone else finds their way out of it. Because when you train your mind to be calm in every situation, you change the trajectory of your life. And even more than that, you become a light in someone else's darkness. You give permission to others to be steady too. And in a world that glorifies chaos, that kind of calm, that's not just powerful, that's revolutionary. Thank you.